Thank you for tuning in to ACTV. My name is Jenny Davidson. I am the CEO and Executive Director of Stand Up Placer, and I'll be your host today. And thank you so much for coming back, Rene. We have Rene here, and she has been on our show before, and we're going to continue a conversation about childhood trauma, resiliency, and adverse childhood experiences. I also want to tell you just a couple minutes about Stand Up Placer, who we are, and how you can get assistance. If at any time during the show you want someone you can reach out to, you can call our crisis line at 1-800-575-5352. Stand Up Placer has been in our community serving survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking for over 40 years. We have the county's only safe house in an undisclosed location where victims of crime can go and live for up to 90 days while they are getting reestablished. And we have 40 units of housing out in the community where people can live for 12 to 24 months while we're paying the rent and they're getting back on their feet. They get case management, therapy, legal assistance, and we have a service office in Roseville and a service office in Auburn where folks can go to get crisis intervention, help with restraining orders, child custody, divorce. We have a full-time family law attorney, and really just a really holistic program there to help survivors of crime. So if you need help, if you know someone who needs help, feel free to call our 800-575-5352 crisis line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So welcome, Rene.
Thank you for having me back.
Thank you. Do you want to maybe introduce yourself? Tell us what you do at Stand Up Placer.
Yeah. So my name's Rene. I'm what's called a marriage and family therapist trainee. So I work on a team with a bunch of therapists, and we provide services to the community.
And you're about to be an associate, so
I am. I'm about to graduate.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And you have a whole team, and we have people are at all different levels, right?
Yes.
We have trainees, associates, and fully licensed MFT therapists. Yep. Fantastic. And could you give us maybe a little recap of what we talked about last time, so then we'll just dive in deep to the other questions?
Absolutely. So last time we met, we talked a lot about trauma, resiliency, ACEs, and how they affect our overall health, kind of the propensity to have problems later in life if those ACEs aren't addressed, either through therapy or through other means. And yeah.
Awesome. I really liked you compared at one point last time the trauma of a car accident and what the physical impacts of that could be with trauma. What are the potential for psychological impacts of trauma? Can you maybe just tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yes, psychological and emotional trauma are just as real as physical traumas. As I mentioned last time, if somebody were to come into a medical office with a badly broken bone or a scraped knee with maybe some debris in it, a doctor would never look at somebody and say, hey, you know what, just go home, don't really worry about it. Just walk it off. That bone will get better eventually. Emotional trauma and psychological trauma are just as big of wounds. And there is a process to kind of going in and really cleaning out those wounds, mending those broken emotional bones, if you will, and really working towards recovery. Trauma is always a part of our stories, but it doesn't have to define us.
Awesome. And so adverse childhood experiences, there are some questions online. People might research this, and they look at my child, has a high number and I'm concerned about it. What would it mean if my child's number is, say 5 on the ACEs scale?
Yeah, trauma and ACEs range from a score of 1 to 10. So depending on the amount of neglect, abuse, substance use, mental illness, and other factors a child is exposed to, they're ranked on that scale of 1 to 10. And what that means is that, A, it doesn't define a child, and it also means that it should be taken seriously. ACEs are one of those things that are a stop sign that the child needs to have their psychological and emotional needs taken care of, or the adult who is looking at these ACEs and saying, you know what, as a kid I experienced a lot of these things, that also needs to be addressed, just so we can kind of reduce the potential for lasting health conditions, reduce the chance that we will choose to do what has been done to us to other people, and so on.
And what can I do if my child does have a high number? What's the next thing I do when I've looked at what those questions are, and I see maybe I should be concerned. My child has been exposed to some pretty major stressors, or I'm even seeing it myself. I was exposed to these things as a child. What is my next step?
So I think the first step is to take it seriously. ACEs are a big indicator that there is a chance for long-lasting effects, that children may internalize what has happened to them and act out either in an aggressive way, or maybe continue the cycle of having unhealthy relationships, or even look for love and affection in very unhealthy sources. So I think the first step is to take it seriously. If your child or yourself has been exposed to domestic violence, human trafficking, or sexual assault, it is so important that you reach out to us. Our crisis line is 1-800-575-5352. When you call that line, a warm person will answer the phone. They'll be able to kind of walk you through the process of what resources we have, what therapy looks like, and answer any questions that you have. So that's really the first step, is A, being aware, B, reaching out.
And so if there's something that we know is that a lot of times adults may, if they've been involved in a domestic violence situation, or whether they're the survivor of the violence, victim of the violence, perpetrator of the violence, anywhere in there's a high correlation that potentially they experience it as child witnesses, correct? And so those folks too could access our services and find ways to have healthier communications and to get through, major life circumstances.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think all trauma, and specifically because of the populations we work with, domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking, they don't just affect one person, they affect the whole family. When a child is sitting at home and watching a parent hurt another parent, that child is affected just as much as the person who's being hurt. And so it's really important if the family is open to it, for everyone to get treatment.
And how do we talk to kids about divorce?
That's a really good question. Divorce is one of those things that I think gets stigmatized. 50-ish% of the population has a divorce at one point in their life. So I'm going to be making some blatant or just general statements about divorce, and kind of how to talk to your children about divorce, because we know that every divorce is different. But I think the first thing is just having the conversation with your child. I think that lets them know that you're open to having a conversation. I think it's important to have age developmentally appropriate conversations with your child. And it's important to really hear and value what the child has to say.
And there are a lot of reasons that people might get divorced, correct?
Absolutely.
Not all of them necessarily stem from one of the kinds of things that we see in our field.
Absolutely.
But the folks who we are helping through that process have generally had domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking. There's been some other layer of trauma besides divorce. So can you tell us a little bit about sort of first step, what is domestic violence?
So domestic violence is the hurting of someone else in a relationship, and that can be physically, emotionally, psychologically, financially. There's a wide range of ways that somebody can be hurt in a relationship, and so it doesn't just look like physical violence. It can be a wide range of different things or a culmination of many of those things.
Right. And a lot of times it's really with that view of trying to have power and control over the other person, right? They want to, like if I want to control you, we're in a relationship, I want to control you. Maybe at first, verbal abuse is all it takes, and you're going to do the things that I want you to do, but after a while that might not work anymore, and I take it up a notch, and it might become physical, or I take away your car keys, or I do whatever it takes in order to maintain control in this relationship.
Yeah, I think part of domestic violence often includes this process of breaking down a person's self-esteem or breaking down their identity and then rebuilding it in the image of their abuser, so that a person feels like, I'm nothing without my abuser, I can't ever leave. And I just want to say, going back to divorce, for many, they have this idea that staying in a relationship is the thing that's going to be best for my kids. And I want to make it known that being in a toxic or unhealthy relationship where a child is exposed to domestic violence or power and control can be just as harmful as the idea that you may have that staying with my partner is better than leaving my abuser.
Yeah, a lot of times that staying is really the thing that's putting the child in more danger, or affecting them emotionally, psychologically more long term. And we know that 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men are victims of severe domestic violence. And so one important thing also is if you have a friend or family member who has sort of, maybe they've tried to talk about domestic violence, but they haven't really called it that or taken it to that level yet, just realizing that with 1 in 4 and 1 in 7 being those statistics, that it's really important to believe them and to listen and ask questions, and even go ahead and call our crisis line, even if you're not the person that's in that violent situation. You just want to ask questions. I have the friend who told me that their spouse or significant other has sort of escalated in the way they're controlling them, and they think, well, they've never hit me, so it's not domestic violence, when in fact that is still domestic violence.
Absolutely.
And how would we talk to kids about that?
I think that's an important conversation to have. Again, like I said before, it's really important to have these conversations in a developmentally appropriate way. I think having the conversation is the first step, and just letting your child know that you're open to talking about this. I think some important messages when it comes to domestic violence, and especially talking to a child who has seen or been a part of domestic violence, is that the first thing is, it's not your fault. It's not the person who is being hurt's fault. There's nothing that they could have done to stop the person from hurting them. It's important for the child to feel heard, seen, and valued, and to make sure that they really understand that there's nothing that they could have done to change the person's behavior as well.
And what about, that child, a lot of times it's their two parents who are fighting with each other. Sometimes it can be tempting to really villainize the other person. What effect could that have on a child if I'm saying, negative things a lot of times about their other parent? How should that part of the conversation go?
Yeah, I think it's important to really remember that your child is made up of 50% you, 50% someone else, and having a conversation around it's okay to be angry at that person at times. It's okay to be really confused. It's okay to even love that person. That doesn't mean that it's okay for the child to be around somebody that hurts other people, but really helping the child understand that they have no part in it and they have no part of changing it is so incredibly important.
That's awesome. And how do we talk? So that's domestic violence specifically, and then we also assist people who are dealing with sexual assault. And how do we talk to kids about their bodies or about their body safety, or what are the words that you use around that, and how do you talk about that?
Yeah, so sexual assault is something that happens pretty frequently. It doesn't happen to everyone, but it's important to talk to your child early about consent of their own body, being body proud, body aware, having control over consent of whether you want people to touch you or not. Oftentimes we really kind of urge kids to go hug and kiss people when they don't want to, and so we can start the message early that they get to choose who they share their bodies with.
So let's say I have a 6-year-old and I told them to clean the room and they didn't get the room clean on time, and it's bedtime now and it's time for your hug and kiss and go to sleep, and they say, nope, I don't want to hug because I didn't get my dessert before I went to bed. And I say, no, come and hug me. What is a better way of maybe going about that nighttime bed routine? When, I think a lot of parents listening at home, they may say, no, it's hug and kiss time. There's going to be a hug and kiss. Or it's a family dinner and grandma came over and she came a long way and she's expecting a hug and a kiss when she gets in that door. Is there a problem with making your child just, there's an expectation to hug grandma, give grandma a kiss?
Yeah, I think part of child's development is really important, and it's having their own autonomy and knowing kind of where their boundaries end and other people's end and begin. And so I would urge parents to really, even though in those moments it would hurt a lot that your child doesn't want to hug and kiss you, to really validate their feelings, being able to understand that they get to feel upset when they don't get their way, and how to handle being able to clean their room and to kind of know that no matter how they're feeling, it doesn't mean that they have to make it up with a hug and a kiss.
And so for me, if my grandchild doesn't want to give me a kiss right when I arrive at the barbecue, instead of having my feelings hurt, maybe seeing that as, wow, this is a really amazing opportunity that my grandchild has right now to maybe establish boundaries for the first time, say no to a kiss, knowing I know in 5 minutes they're going to come up to me and climb up on my lap and give me a kiss on my cheek. It's going to happen eventually because they miss me. They're just maybe feeling off guard. And that's okay.
Absolutely. I think it's very okay. And I think teaching children that message of they get to choose who and when they share their affection with is so important. It really can be something where there's a lot of shame around not doing that as we enter into adulthood. And that's where I think a lot of survivors feel like, I can't say no to my boyfriend because they want to have sex with me, or I can't say no to somebody at the bar who's pursuing me and potentially put something in my drink, and then I don't have control over my body. So I think the lessons that we teach our children early have a lasting impact on how they interact out in the world and their ability to say no.
That's incredible. I think that it's such an important conversation for families to be having, even with the kids in a different room, right? Like grandma, mom and dad, aunts and uncles, talking about, hey, right now we're teaching our 3-year-old that they can say no to touch. They get to choose who and when they're going to have a kiss or a hug or touch. And they can say no. And we're doing this because we really want to build up that sense of self and their ability to say no to touch.
Yeah, it's almost like a muscle that really kind of needs to be used and to practice. For many, as they're entering out into the world, it's hard to say no to everything, especially if they have a people-pleasing component to them. And so I think really learning that in childhood can serve them well as they enter into adulthood, and being able to say no to who touches my body. It's okay to say no, and it's okay to be able to have consent over who I'm in relationship with.
That's awesome. And then I think a lot of times, especially my generation, I definitely talk to my kids a lot about stranger danger, right? And like we have the little rhymes and things. And it was always, if a stranger wants you to get in their car, or if a stranger wants to give you candy, or a stranger, you know, and then we take them trick-or-treating and they get candy from strangers.
Yes.
But if a stranger wants to touch you in the bathroom or something like that, like you say no, you run. And we were really like inundated our children with stranger danger. But how often would you say, or is it more often, if children are molested, is it more often more likely to be a stranger or someone who they know?
It's absolutely most likely to be somebody that they know. I think there is kind of this fear that gets sensationalized because often we hear about it on the news or in the media that somebody was attacked by a stranger. So that is kind of at the forefront of our minds, and it is okay to talk to your kids about not going into strange places with people that they don't know. But I think it is really important to talk about body safety and body autonomy, because the truth is that people are most likely, if they are going to be assaulted or molested, it's by somebody that they know and that is close to the family, whether it's a family member or a close family friend. When we look at how kind of sexual assault or molestation happens, there's kind of this grooming process where touch and other things are used to kind of help the child not be able to say no or not want to say no.
And I can say in my 20 years, and this is just me as a person, not stand-up Placer, but as I've advocated for hundreds of sexual assault victims through the years, and I've gone on the forensic exams with them at the hospital, I've done crisis intervention, me personally interacting with survivors myself, I've only ever had one person who was assaulted by someone they didn't know. And so it's way, way, way more common. And so if you're sitting at home right now and you're hearing this and you think, wow, you know, like I had a hard time really calling this sexual assault or molest because it was somebody that I knew, and I felt like I don't want to hurt that person. I care about that person, somebody who's a good friend or a relative who I really care about. I don't want something bad to happen to them. But yeah, I have kind of felt like this, but I didn't really realize I could put a name to it because it was somebody that I care about. I don't want them to have some terrible consequence. I want the touching to stop. I want to feel better about myself. I want to get the help I need. Please do call our crisis line, call and talk to someone with who can help you with crisis intervention, safety planning, and therapy. Again, that number is 1-800-575-5352. And as we've looked at some of this stranger danger kind of thing, I think out there in the world, there's all this stuff, especially on social media, around trafficking, right? Like this panel van is going to pull up to your house and kidnap your 4-year-old and sell them into trafficking. You know, somebody followed me outside of Walmart and my child was in the shopping cart and kind of looked over. And I'm not saying that there aren't some scary characters out there. There definitely are. And you should definitely watch your kids and keep them safe. We haven't seen this, you know, panel van kidnapping by strangers really at all in our community. That's not what's happening. So first, to kind of give a couple definitions, human trafficking, sex trafficking specifically, is when a victim is forced to have sex through force, fraud, or coercion. If the victim's under 18, then law enforcement doesn't even need to prove force, fraud, or coercion. They're just, sex is being traded for something of value. So that could be money, it could be guns, it could be drugs, it could be they're forced to become addicted to drugs in order for that trafficker to gain control over them. And so there are a lot of different ways that that's happening, but what we're seeing is that it's happening a lot with when preteens or young teenagers are maybe left alone for way too long, correct? And they're maybe out at some public space. And so how can parents talk to their kids about human trafficking or safety around that? What should parents know too?
I think the first thing that parents can do is really get educated. You can go on the National Human Trafficking website, and there's all kinds of information about kind of how trafficking happens, how people get recruited, and how people end up being sold commercially. We offer a lot of educational seminars. We offer information if anybody calls, so we're a great resource to kind of get information about. I think the first thing is having a conversation with your child and really kind of letting them know that this is something on your mind and something that you're concerned about. I think you brought up the malls. The malls are kind of this place, or maybe even movie theaters, where I think a lot of parents think, oh, I can drop my kids off. It's a great place. It's safe, and there's no supervision happening. We know that malls are definitely a place where traffickers who are looking to offer modeling opportunities or music video opportunities kind of hang out and start to get to know kids. The other really big one that I would say is the internet. I think knowing what your kids are doing on the internet is incredibly important. Knowing their activity on social media, I think it can be this kind of idea of like, oh, I don't want to invade in my kids' privacy. But the truth is that on the internet, your children have unlimited access to people all over the world. And those traffickers and those people that are looking to exploit children also have unlimited access to the people that they reach. And so social media, I think, is the biggest way that children are often recruited and are targeted. And so being aware and being involved in your children's multimedia activity is super important.
And something we see is, like, say, we haven't necessarily seen, like at these public gathering places that a lot of negative things are happening right there. But what happens is these kids are meeting other kids. They're connecting on social media, and now they're connected to that kid's whole network, and we don't know who they are, and they're connected to people. So it's bringing in this like spider web of other people, and the traffickers have people out there looking for kids who could be vulnerable. And so they're connecting with them on social media and saying, hey, send me a picture of just your arm. And then it escalates, right? They're like, oh, now I want a picture of your legs. Now I want a picture of, and it'll escalate into something. Before the kid knows it, they're pulled into something that is, really, really a dark place. So I would suggest that people who want more information around trafficking, what's happening here in our community, we do have other videos we've done with ACTV specifically on that topic. So go to ACTV's YouTube channel and watch those. And then also have Stand Up Plaster come out and talk to your community group, and we can give you information about how to recognize this, how to keep your kids safe, and what you can do around that. And then just real quick, I want to just thank you again, Rene, for being part of this, for the other episode as well. So make sure that you try and catch both of those episodes. Keep your TV tuned to ACTV all the time, because they always have these fantastic programs. And and thank you to ACTV. Thank you to everyone out there who tuned in and spent a half an hour listening on this topic, and for wanting to make a difference in your community. Again, this is Jenny Davidson with Stand Up Plaster, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.